Welcome, welcome, and once again, welcome. Whether you are sitting, standing, walking, running, or laying on your couch, I want you to smile for a few seconds. Because think about it. You are alive. You are thinking, breathing, and moving. You're one of 8 billion. So congratulations, you made it. Something else all of us 8 billion have in common is that every single person has had the experience of childhood. Every single person has also had their fair share of pain, suffering, and confusion during their childhood. All of this, I believe, has played a crucial role in developing our fears, insecurities, behavioral patterns, and our total perspective on life itself. Everyone deals with their pain in their own way, but I am here to tell you what I did with mine. I would like to start off by thanking you, yes, you, for being here and giving me your very valuable attention and time. I believe that together we can make sure that the world hears what I have to say, and hopefully we can make it a better place for both the two of us, along with everyone else. This first episode will be dedicated to doing my absolute best at explaining what my life has been centered around for the past 3+ years, and how it has immensely impacted the quality of almost all the aspects of my life in a positive way. You will also get to hear a very personal example from my own childhood that was highly chaotic. What it was like while it was happening, but also the aftermath of everything so far. I am incredibly excited and can't believe that I am finally here creating the first ever episode of many more to come. So without further ado, let's dive in. As a child, I would argue that most of the change you experience is not dictated by personal choice, but rather it's largely controlled by the consequences of your environment, both positive and negative. All of the things you've seen, people you've interacted with, behavior you've observed, etc., all of this has played a part in creating you, the person listening to this right now. But have you ever really stopped and taken a look back? Like, what really happened? How and why are you the way that you are? I mean, none of us at any point in our lives were given like a big menu where we could choose different attributes, characteristics, interests, fears, and insecurities for ourselves. The only place that exists is in video games, but that's not what we're doing. We're living life. And if you really think about it, have you ever had a moment where you were able to pick which insecurity you will carry with you into your, let's say, teenage life, or maybe even your adult life? Have you? Or has anyone ever experienced 10 different fears, and then all of these fears have been explained to you, and you're like, okay, I will now let you pick whichever one you want to keep for the future? No. I mean, it hasn't happened to me, and I've never heard of any person that has happened to. So the question still remains, where did we get them from? Now, there is a genetic and a biological explanation for this as well. However, since I am no biologist, nor am I a genetic expert, I will only be sharing my personal experience with finding these answers. And for that, we will have to go back a few years, because it all started with a very good friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine. We had slowly built up a habit of just sitting down and talking about each other's weak points. I mean, what could be done to improve them, as well as discussing our strengths and what those could be useful for, or whether we were wasting too much time on something. And after a while, a lot of time went into thinking about these weak points. The fact that they were just there, along with all my insecurities, moods, thoughts, ego, and the list goes on. It was as if all of this was randomly given to me, and now I was in a position of where I had to deal with it and live my life with all of this present, and at any time it could be brought out. Something could be said and my insecurity could spike. I could be taken off guard. Someone could play with my ego as if it were toys. Someone could create mood swings for me if they knew what to do or what to say or what to give me. So you're just kind of randomly given stuff that makes you vulnerable, and you have no idea how to defend yourself. But for me, it was very important for me to learn how to defend my inner world. Like, what can be attacked and what can be done to protect what can be attacked. And luckily for me, ever since I was young, I'd never been much of a complainer. So I never resorted to thinking that this was unfair, that, why was I given this or why am I like this? It was quite the opposite actually. A curiosity of where all of this comes from had started to build up inside me. The theory at the time was that if I could just find out how certain people and events from my childhood affected me both emotionally and rationally, or gave me certain ideas, I would get better access to changing these things into something that I deemed to be better for both me and those around me. Now, after doing this for some time, I had to come up with a term for this practice because I started to tell other people about it and they were like, oh, what is it? Blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to come up with my own word. And I ended up with childish adventures. The idea being that you are in a way transforming yourself back into the child version of yourself when discovering these things. As you have to go back in time in relation to memory and emotion, all the while the whole thing being a massive adventure, as you never know what you're going to find and end up with, or even where you will be led the next time, you find something. And since I was doing something as a child, more specifically, I was on an adventure as a child, I named it Childish Adventures. Pretty simple, actually. And for me, going back, day after day, of course, I didn't do this every day, but for the past 3.5 years, it has occupied a big, big portion of my life. I've put a lot of energy, a lot of resource, a lot of time into it, and a lot of observance as well. And this is something I would highly, highly recommend you do the next time you lose control of your life. And I mean, when you intentionally want to do something, let's say right now you decide you're going to go to the grocery store. And on the way to the grocery store, someone tells you something very specific that it takes you away from your mission that was to go to the grocery store. They spark some sort of insecurity. Maybe they call you a short motherfucker. Maybe that's what they say. Hey, short motherfucker, learn how to walk. And maybe you were bullied for being short your whole childhood, and that created a certain insecurity around the fact that you are short, a short person. And on that specific day, maybe you didn't really have, healthy food or enough sleep, and that sentence sparks that insecurity, and that insecurity takes over your whole day, and it, removes the mission you had, just throws you completely off course. And then maybe you go start an argument with that person, and who knows what that will lead to. But the point of this little example was that if you have these things inside you that you do not completely understand, you have no idea how they are awakened and how long it takes for them to calm down again, what needs to be done for them to calm down again. And all of these things are just so unknown to us. And that is part of the adventure. You close your eyes, you take a few deep breaths, you go back to the past. Maybe you see your face of your father, face of your mother, your teacher. You remember crying, you remember smiling, you remember being angry. Whatever these moments are, some of them were intense enough to leave a mark. But not only a mark, also an understanding that this is the way it is. If we go back to the example I just provided, it would be being short is bad. That's that kid, that's all he knows. Being short is bad because of what he had lived through. But he doesn't know that. He just gets mad every single time someone tells him he's short. And yeah, you just have to take this whole journey. At least that's what I do. I'm not saying you have to do anything, but I'm trying to inspire as many people as possible to try the same thing. Because it's a vast fountain of opportunity. I myself am able to observe certain characteristics, values, morals, insecurities, and ideas that are not structured in a way that fully supports my life's direction or purpose. They're destructive, and they just throw me off course, and I don't like to have them there. And they also make me act in a way towards my loved ones that I would not prefer. That is not a way I would prefer to act. So that is why I prefer to remove those things which makes me act that way. And the intensity of what I'm able to meet can differ at times. Sometimes I find them myself, mostly through meditation and thought building, which is I observe, for example, that I am very prone to lying, let's say. This was a few years back, but it's another personal example. By the way, the example about the short guy, that was not a personal example because I'm actually quite tall, but let's move on for the lying part, which was me lying. Obviously, it doesn't serve people well, and when I observed myself lying, I'm like, okay, I lied about this and this and this, but why do I lie? What am I trying to run from? You ask a question, and then you answer the question, but those are all thoughts. And then with an answer, question, you go thought, 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 and eventually you've built so many thoughts, and you connect the dots that you arrive at a destination. So you can do it intentionally, but sometimes it also comes randomly. And yeah, you just build it upon pretty much logic and observed details. Like, what have I seen for myself? What do I know of the past? And what makes sense? But there will be times where I will go more into detail, and I will uncover more of how to actually, do this very efficiently. And other times I'm met with a simple truth initiated by a sequence of events, people, or memories. These certain truths almost never arrive comfortably, and they're very hard to receive and listen to as the truth. Denial pops up quicker than you can stand up from your couch. I'll promise you that. And a great source for these uncomfortable truths has actually been my mother, believe it or not. And I could never thank her enough for giving me the gift of guiding me towards being a person who respects and listens to the truth rather than hiding and rejecting it. It has made my life so much more clearer. It has made me understand myself and the effect other people have on me so much better. And it makes receiving critique and constructive criticism and all these things so much easier because you have a good relationship with truth. You understand that in the end, it will help you. It will hurt you in the moment, but in the end, it will help you. And that is much better than being helped in the moment and hurt in the long run. And, no matter the intensity or occasion, I always do my very best to get the most out of an opportunity as rare as this. Whenever something pops up, whenever I recognize that this needs to be changed if I want to have a better life, I always do my very best to get the most out of an opportunity that is as rare as that. I know I just said it, but I need to repeat it because most, if not all of our time is spent away from these thoughts. You're either looking at something, listening to something, eating something, drinking something, studying something, building something, whatever you're doing, you're always away from this sort of internal world and what's going on there. So every time I get a little bit of a sneak peek of what's actually going on, I try to put off a little bit of time and resource and energy and really go into it and see what am I trying to tell myself, because that's literally what it is. Now, moving on to really hammer this point home and try and provide a little bit more context into what I exactly mean. It is as if the foundational world that exists inside of you, where everything else was built upon, was created during this period. And by this period, I mean your childhood. All of the challenges and lingering emotional or ideological fallacies that come with it are the token of your success. They are the building blocks for your potential. Everything that you are not good at, you can become good at. And everything that you are already good at is what you use to navigate through the world in a semi-successful way. And when you build up your lackluster parts, you become more and more complete, making you more and more successful, making life more and more easy, or easier, if you want to be grammatically correct. And the more you play around with them, the higher you will build yourself. Ignore these things, however, and you are in for a hell of a ride, my friend, because the consequences are waiting for you on the other end. When you're 40 years old and you can't deal with the fact that your wife is giving you criticism and it's bringing up some insecurities from when you were 14 and laughed at the playground, good luck fixing that, because that is going to be 100 times more difficult than it would be to take on the challenge now. So my recommendation is to start as early as possible, because during this foundational creation period, every individual ends up lacking some sort of knowledge or attribute that makes living in the adult world challenging. Ergo, the example I just gave. Have you ever thought about that? Have you? Have you ever questioned what your adult life would be like if you don't fix these things? If you haven't, you should. There's a certain insecurity that you wished did not exist, that you could, instead of feeling vulnerable and out of control, you would feel confident and aware. And this could be a lot of things. It could be, for example, a lack of openness, your ability to take in different opinions and worldviews. Does it come with ease, or is there often a struggle when you're faced with these situations? Because every single human has either gotten too little of something or too much of something during their childhood, whether it's attention, discipline, failure, success, love, hate, whatever it is. There is always something that you've received too much of and something that you maybe haven't even received any of. And that could be really tough to overcome. And it leaves gaps and creates imbalance within the individual. And that being said, it also gives your life the opportunity of being an unfinished project. And I have personally found that treating life as exactly this, as an opportunity and as an unfinished project, has given me the liberty of treating my bad qualities and lack of knowledge as sort of a bridge between me and a better me. And instead of beating myself up and shaming myself into misery because I'm not perfect, I instead try to build that bridge as often as I can to make sure that I'm always moving towards that better version of me. Because when I look at a better version of myself in a few years, I know that that person has a better life than I currently have. And if I feel like I want that life, I also know that I have to become that person. And of course, you don't need to aim to be perfect, because don't get me wrong, I have had those thoughts before. And there was a period of my life where the shadow of perfection crushed the quality of my life. I tried to do too much, say too much, be too much, and it was just too tiring, took away all my energy and my intention. I just couldn't keep everything together. But how I overcame that is a story for another time. For now, I'll tell you a story from my own childhood, something very impactful. Because there's a lot to discuss and explain when it comes to childish adventures. And over the course of time and more episodes, I'll be getting more detailed about certain parts of the process and also giving several of my own personal examples and experiences. And in order for me to get a step closer to creating an understanding around what I am trying to present. And on that note, I've said it once, I'll say it again, an example from my own childhood. A period that was difficult to manage and provided me with both insecurities and behavioral patterns that worked against me for years and years and years. But also traits, characteristics, and perspectives on life that have served me very well and built me into a strong, intelligent young man. Now, talking about my personal example, in order for us to get there, we will have to travel back 17 years, all the way to when I was 5 years old, I believe soon turning 6. Now, I am not 100% sure of the exact month or year. It's between 5 and 6 years old. I've tried talking to my parents and other people and finding out exactly what was and how long it was. I don't have it down to the exact detail, but it's 5 turning 6 is the closest and the most precise I have gotten. And I'd like to point out that at the time, I had absolutely zero idea of what was going on. You know, for me, it was just another ordinary day. I'm walking around doing my child stuff. However, while life for me went on as usual, at the same time, my father was sentenced to prison for several years. Now, whether you are a normal human being or a freak of nature, the sudden absence of a parent will bring some level of pain and emotional distress into any child's life. But the case for me was, especially if it is not clear why the absence happened, as I was never told the truth of where he actually was, and thus also never told exactly when he would be coming back. And for some time, I held some anger and resentment towards the people that were keeping the truth from me. But I realized that at the time, they were doing what they believed was the optimal route to protect me as much as possible. So after I realized that and put myself in their shoes, you know, they have a 6-year-old kid that doesn't know where his father is. And what are you going to tell him? Oh, he made some bad choices and he's in prison, kid. You can't really tell a child that. So yeah, they came up with a lot of stories and a lot of alternatives, but it didn't really matter what they said. It sucked anyway. And this is without a doubt what made this period as painful and impactful as it was. You know, I was never told as to why he was permanently away and why he couldn't just come home and visit once in a while. I remember I was told that, you know, he's off at work and he's doing this and this. And after like a year, I was like, who works 365 days a year? It doesn't make sense. Everyone else comes home from work. Why can't he? Why can I not see my father? A now 6-year-old boy in emotional distress, waiting for his father to come home, and the only thing I had to cling on to really was hope. You know, because I had no real, I guess, path or plan as to when I would see him. I could just hope. And as much as I have successfully managed to remember about myself and the situation from that period of my life, as time went on, I could see myself start to smile less. I can see myself losing stability. New opinions and emotions are created towards certain people and certain relationships. And if I really focus and get in touch with myself, I also realize that certain beliefs and some of my perspectives on the world changed a lot during that time. A period where a little boy loses his father's presence is going to be very impactful for that child. And in that case, it was me. And you also have to realize that what happened to me in that moment, whatever it was that I experienced, all of that is still lingering somewhere inside my mind, my body, and my soul. You know, whichever way that experience shaped me as it happened, it is still affecting me in my everyday life as I am currently speaking. Because that 6-year-old boy is me, but many years later. And the reason I took things into my own hand and knew that I had to revisit certain areas of my childhood was because of the irrational and hurtful conclusions I had made as a kid. You know, those are still with me, and unless I redefined, observed, and disproved them, they would always be there. Meaning that they would always influence my actions, words, and thoughts. And since I did not want that happening, I had to dive deep and forgive, accept, and grow. And I still so clearly remember all the times I visited my grandmother, so the mother of my father, and every time I would go give her like a quick hug and then storm past her to check the living room, the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen, pretty much every single corner of that apartment to see if my father was there. Each time I was met with the same disappointment. Oftentimes I remember I cried a lot and uncontrollably, looking for answers, but never receiving any. The crying was, of course, at its worst at the start, but over time it started to get better, and especially as the years went by. But however much time passed and whatever happened, it never stopped being painful. And even as I am telling the story and, reimagining what it was like, I can feel these emotions kind of arising within me. I can feel my heart get heavier. I can feel myself become a little bit more anxious, a little bit more out of place. But I am comfortable enough with this now that I can both share it with everyone else, but that I can also live with these emotions and still continue doing whatever I want to do. Another thing that was actually very difficult was I have these clear memories of seeing other children have their father present when I could not understand why mine wasn't. Seeing fathers pick up their children from school, especially if it were my boy classmates, that father-son dynamic, it just shattered my heart, seeing a father and a son together. And when I was becoming unsure of when I could have that privilege again, when could my father be picking me up? And over time, I think it actually made me question my value. Was it because of something I had done? Were these other boys better than me? Was that the reason as to why my father wasn't here? Could it be? Or maybe he found something better to do. Something better than me. And even though I don't remember this clearly, I believe eventually I stopped looking for him at houses, apartments, streets, and wherever I would run and storm and be, oh, is he here or is he here? No, I eventually stopped, but I didn't stop completely. I just took a dive elsewhere. I put on my detective glasses and turned my brain to 100, trying to now create a reason as to where he could be. Now, I'm pretty sure you too can guess that a little child isn't that good at reasoning, and what I came up with at the time was, of course, with no surprise at all, unreasonable and not true. One of them being the previously mentioned lower self-value, believing that I was not worth as much as the other kids since my father did not want to come and pick up me. My father didn't want to go to the mall with me, didn't want to go to football practice, didn't want to play with toys at home, whatever. He didn't want to do it, so I must not be worth enough. And this is, however, something I did not discover until recent years when going through this period. And discovering all of the conclusions I had made and what sort of beliefs my emotional state at the time had created when I was a little kid. And I will go into more detail, but before I do that, I have to give the world's most incredible pat on the back to that kid. I sometimes think back and admire the strength of that little boy, the courage to keep going even when faced with adversity and uncertainty, a shift from harmony to complete chaos, but he still survived. He hung in there and he got through it. And for that, I will forever be thankful and have respect towards my younger self. And the thing I mentioned earlier about, whatever happens to you as a kid, you are still that kid, but years later, me now giving respect to that little kid and what he lived through is also me giving respect to myself now. And that just raises your overall well-being, both mentally and physically. At least, that is what I can say from my personal experience. So I would say this, do not underestimate what kind of strength you can reveal and showcase when becoming more and more independent through constant detective work within yourself in the pursuit of finding out who you are and why you are the person you are. I've seen that for me personally, the more security I have built up within myself, the less dependent I am on other people's output. You know, whether it is energy, conversation, emotions, or just time spent together, I find such I find myself so likable that, you know, whenever I have to spend time alone or have conversations with myself or do something alone, it's almost as good as being with other people. Because when I am with other people, I am still to a certain degree with myself, but I just add someone to that dynamic. So, if that makes sense. You know, I am happier than ever when spending time with myself. I love to sing when I'm alone. I love to discuss ideas with myself. I love making food and eating by myself, watching movies, listening to music, working out, going for long walks in the forest and smelling the fresh air, especially in the summer and warmer times when the birds are singing. Woo! That really hits the soul. And almost all of my activities that I do, I have no problem doing them alone. And do not get this wrong. This is not to say that I do not like being with other people. Of course I do. It is just that after achieving such a loving and likable relationship with myself, the number of people I spend time with has decreased drastically to only a handful. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that every time I discovered something about myself, which was either hard to admit, difficult to face, or challenging to change, I tried my very best to find out as to why this was. What was it about this specific thing, thought, or emotion that caught my curiosity? I followed the line, and in the end, it always delivered me to a wonderful place. The exact same happened when I was looking back, you know, many, many years and trying to remember what I felt at the time when my father was in prison. Did I have any memories? Were they relevant memories? And was there anything new to find? Was there anything still to feel? Did I have the emotions and feelings locked away in a place far away and guarded? So many questions, I know. But eventually I got an answer to pretty much all of them. Some answers were, of course, better than others. Some I still have to investigate and debate to see whether they are good answers to live with. And I'll, of course, be sharing some of my discoveries with you soon, but here is something that needs to be said before we continue. And this is something that has helped me a tremendous amount and changed the way I look at almost everything that has to do with human interaction. It is my ability to press a little pause button on certain emotions that I carry towards a person from a previous encounter. And you are most likely familiar with what I am describing. You know, where your behavior towards someone changes in a certain way. Now, it can become either more aggressive or more passive. It could be more cold, more resentful, but it could also be more open, more energetic. You know, whatever it is, usually, at least for me, all of that came from a reaction to either what the other person did or said the last time we interacted together. But it was almost always a reaction that I kept inside only for me to know about and which I did not tell the other person. You know, a kind of judgment I made that was kept inside my little safe in my head. And I did not tell the other person that, oh, you know what you said the other day? It made me feel like this. No, I did not say it. I just kept it for myself. And when I did that, or when I sometimes still do that, it obviously sits with me. And if not dealt with, it will slowly poison my relationship with that person. Of course, worst of all, that I slowly also poison myself as long as that person exists within my life. And when you eventually poison yourself so much that you start to get rotten on the inside, all the while still looking for the person who poisoned you on the outside, you are in for one long ride of misery, confusion, and constant blame. And this I can absolutely guarantee, at least from my personal experience. You know, when you have a certain negative reaction to something someone did, and you carry those negative feelings that are connected to that reaction with you for a significant amount of time, you will eventually start to feel worse and worse every single day. And you will then start looking for who is to blame for the fact that I feel worse every single day. The day you blame yourself is the day you start growing. And yeah, basically when someone does something that I have strong beliefs against, I do not tell that person. Yeah, I think I already covered this, but I don't tell them that I don't like what they did. I just keep it in myself, and eventually turns into resentment on the inside. And yeah, I don't only resent that person, I start resenting the whole world. And, I failed to realize that it was me all along. It was my fault. My fault for keeping that emotion inside me and letting it poison me. And this was something, a lot of this was happening with my father. However, after becoming aware that the poison is brewed on the inside and not the outside, I got a new and refreshed perspective on him, what he had done, and our relationship. You have to understand that what my father did or did not do, I myself had absolutely no say in the decision-making progress, nor did I have control over what was going to happen. I was never consulted on whether the actions that would lead him to a prison sentence was a good idea or not. No one ever asked me. So I didn't even know that he was doing them. I didn't even know that it would lead him to prison. And I did not know that he even went to prison. So I was pretty much out of the loop until, of course, many, many years later. And all the experience that I share with him are already, all the experiences that I shared with him or didn't share with him are already past the present moment. They are written into my history forever, and there is absolutely nothing I can do to change it when it comes to what happened, as that will forever remain the same. But what I can, however, do is observe and remodel my understanding of the events. One of the things that I am extremely grateful for learning is that I could now detach myself to a big degree, as I had made an internal agreement that I did not partake in the planning of my father's actions or life decisions. He made them all on his own. And even though the negative consequences of these actions brought a lot of pain into my life at times, I have accepted the fact that this was the way it was supposed to be. This was the way that my life was supposed to go. And there was nothing I could do to avoid or undo the pain. I could only learn how to live with it and what to do with it. And more importantly, what to build with it. Time would take care of the rest. It would heal my pain, but it was up to me to, decide what these beliefs and pains were going to mean in the future. What am I going to build upon that? And of course, I could judge him. I could sympathize with him. I could be angry with him. I could feel sad about the way things had gone. But for me, always arriving back to the thought of, hey, what are the different ways that I can look at these events, and what sort of benefits do these options carry with them into the future? And when first encountering this period and observing the facts, was my current view and understanding of what had happened serving me in a good way? In a very few ways, maybe yes. But all in all, the majority of the effect it was having on me, both the present and future me, was negative. Because a lot of the conclusions I had come to were false and irrational. Like the one about myself, low self-value. If I would carry that belief that I was not worth enough because my father was not present with me, my life would be a lot worse. But realizing that the decision or the reason as to why he was away was because he was in prison, and the reason as to why he was in prison was because of his own choices, and his choices had nothing to do with me, also means that that period has nothing to do with my self-value, if that makes any sense at all. So yeah, I wanted to change that, and I knew that the only way I could do that would be to change myself. So rather than looking at what he did or feeling a certain way about it, I instead took a look deeper inside. I started focusing on what sort of influence his actions had on me, not on what I could do to influence his actions, in order to get the dad that I want. And what I wanted deep down was, I guess, what every kid would want in that situation. And that was to get their father back. So that the void and emptiness that was created during that childhood would be filled. You know, can I please have the years back where he wasn't there? Could I please have my father? But a while ago, I realized and came to terms with the fact that this is just one of the things that is never going to happen for me. Even though I tried many times, even sacrificing my own well-being and mental health, to have a chance at restoring him and making sure he was an individual with habits, values, and discipline, so that he could finally be the father I was so desperately looking for. It is unfortunately, however, not going to happen. And of course, you never know what the future brings, but my expectations have brought me enough pain and disappointment. So for now, I choose to move on. The wish of having my father in a certain role that I still carried with me from my younger age had to be forgotten and replaced with a new wish. That if I ever wanted to ever create that feeling and accomplish a wish like that, it would have to be created within the next generation. My children. Getting rid of my resentment towards my father for the gaps that he left me with was a difficult and scary path. Totally worth it, but damn. It was a dark tunnel and everything and nothing staring straight into your soul. But you just have to walk the walk, you know, however painful, confusing, uncertain, disturbing it is. You have to walk the walk until you eventually walked so far that the place that previously gave you pain and made life darker is nowhere to be seen. It's so far behind you that it almost doesn't even affect you anymore. So now, moving further, I would like to get a little bit more specific about how I was actually affected by this period. I've already touched on the low self-value thing, but this will be based on what I've been able to observe and put together so far. You know, all of the episodes I've had within myself while meditating or journaling or just, you know, walking around and getting certain thoughts. That is what I have based my conclusions on. And there will definitely be more revealed in the future, but for now, I am confident that this is going to be absolutely fantastic. So, now we arrive at the aftermath of everything. This part I felt like I needed to structure as little as possible, and I ended up with structuring it not at all. I do not have any bullet points. I do not have any certain things I am going to say. I just felt like I would let my mind explore this thought and this segment of the episode, and whatever arrives into my mind will also arrive on this episode, or land on this episode, so to say. So apologies if things get a little bit confusing and you don't really know where I'm going with it, but that is how I want to do this for now, and we'll see how it works. And I would like to start with describing what this whole experience did with me when I was still a child and when all of this was happening. And I think from there, I will further on move to the actual aftermath of me looking back at what had happened and the conclusions I had come to, the certain emotions I was still carrying with me, and what all of that sort of did, or what sort of change it produced once I had gone through that process. But to start off with me as a child, the main thing it did with me, it just created a very chaotic child. Now, not necessarily 24/7, 365 chaotic child, but it gave me a lot of chaotic behavior, it gave me chaotic thoughts, you know, traits, characteristics, whatever you might call it, but it just made me into a little bit more of a chaotic child. And eventually, the chaos that was brewing inside of me in my internal world also started reflecting itself out into the external world, as is with anything else that you have excess of in the internal world. You know, it could be anger, could be sadness. You eventually portray that out into other people or other, areas. You could drink or you could punch, you can run, whatever. And I, for example, started doing a lot worse at school. My desire to show up to school decreased as time went on. And I believe I got into more trouble with the teachers. And yeah, I just started misbehaving a bit more. And actually, looking back at my school diaries, because, shit was old school back then, I also saw that as every single year went on, my average grades were dropping slightly every single year. Because I think my focus and attention was so drastically elsewhere that school sort of didn't become the ultimate priority anymore. And I also didn't have that father figure to discipline me and teach me the value of, doing your homework properly and studying for your tests. So I just started to drift away from the whole establishment as a whole. I also started stealing more. I pretty much stole from everywhere and from everyone, except from my close family and my parents. I did not steal from them as clearly as I can remember. I don't remember stealing anything from them, but maybe I did and I just don't remember it. But I am quite certain I did not. But yeah, when it comes to the stealing, it was a lot from stores, but for all kinds of stuff, And it took me a long time to get caught, actually, and I don't know why I am to a certain degree proud of this, but I guess it's just my cleverness as a kid that I respect. I do not condone stealing and do not say it is a good thing to do, but even that I sort of succeeded at. And the biggest thing that I think happened to me was that I started lying more. And this is definitely something that I did the most and continued to do as time went on. I think almost all the way until I was 19 years old, that is when I, for the first time in my life, started to actively reduce the amount of lying I was doing. And this was sort of also my kind of a villain aspect of my personality, because I believe at some point I had realized that people were lying to me when I was a kid. Going back to my father is in prison and no one telling me what is going on. Since after hearing so many different versions of where he was and when he was coming back, I could tell that I was not told the truth. And considering that I was in a lot of pain at the time, I think the little me had arrived to the conclusion that lying back to the world would give the world the same pain that I had to live with. Which is, that is something that I have analyzed quite deeply and, in a very abstract way. And I've also tried to test those theories, and I'm almost 100% sure that is exactly what happened. I also started becoming more of a rebel, or a rebel, let's say. I would constantly be out and trying to throw stuff where it wasn't supposed to be thrown. I would break things that weren't supposed to be broken. And the list goes on and on. I was just a kid taking a chance from time to time to go against what was allowed, break the rules. And something else, I think this will kind of be my last point because I don't remember any other significant ones from when I was a child, is I also started developing certain ways of talking which would make me seem like a victim. And I would do this as cleverly as I could so that other people wouldn't understand what I was up to, but that I would still get what my ultimate goal was, and that was sympathy. I would make up stories about something bad that had happened to me, or I would portray things that already had happened, but in a much, much worse way than they actually were. So that was the kind of mechanism I had developed to get sympathy. But it wasn't only sympathy. It was also a sort of cry for help. That something was hurting me and that I actually in some way felt like a victim of something that I did not understand. If that makes any sense. Like I did not understand what was going on, but I was in a lot of pain. And this was, I guess, the only way I could indicate that to everyone around me. The only thing I knew was that I was hurting. I just didn't know why. And now, even though I have listed all of these things, it does not mean that I was like this all of the time. I think I already mentioned this, but I just want to get this clear cut. It's not like I became a chaotic ball of like a thunderstorm, like a chaos 24/7. Actually, from what I have heard from both my parents and my aunts and my uncles and my teachers and all the people that I've talked to that observed me as a child, I was a very lovely, reasonable, and smart kid. I'm just trying to express the chaos brought into my life because of my father not being present. And that was responsible for a lot of negative behavior. But once I grew up, I changed my opinion of that and realized that if I were to continue this negative behavior, I would now be responsible. Because if I have the opportunity to realize why it is happening and also have the opportunity to change what is happening, me not doing that is directly me allowing that behavior to continue, thus me now bearing the responsibility for this. Okay, so moving on from me as a child, I would now like to touch upon the moments that I have revisited this as a more grown adult. Or not necessarily grown adult, but as a young man. Because I am now 22 years old, just for reference. I don't think I have mentioned that yet. But I would first like to touch upon emotions. I thought about including this now because it is one of my weak points, getting in touch with my feelings and recognizing what makes me feel how. It is still something I am working on. But I remember that after months had passed, I can remember emotional insecurity building around the fact that other children had their father present and I did not. This I already talked about. And not to mention the incredible burden of having to carry around all the devastating emotions that arise with the absence of a parent. So going deeper into the subject of emotions around that period of my life, the first time that I took a deep dive and visited this part of my childhood, I was overwhelmed by negative, but also, and this is very important, unfamiliar emotion. The way this happened was that I was sitting by myself, going deep into my meditation. I think I was around 20 minutes in already. It was quite a lot, at least. And I could feel it all flushing in like I had broken a dam and the water was powerful. Like it was just flushing and it was rushing towards me. Like there was nothing I could do to stop it. And the fear of entering and facing those emotions was making my heart beat faster, and my desire to distract myself was growing immensely. And at this point, there was very little left of me that wanted to pursue this experience. I just wanted to tap out of the meditation and just, go on with my life. But I don't know. I mean, I had no desire to do this physically, but mentally and almost spiritually, I knew that this was something that had to be done. Like that, it felt like a very rare moment. The curiosity just got the better of me. And I wanted to give myself a better chance for a better life, so I just dived in. I didn't care. Something very interesting that I noticed almost immediately when I dived in was that all of this emotion that I was trying to feel and empathize with didn't really belong to me. It was a part of my history, but it still somehow felt foreign, as if I was trying to understand someone else. These feelings had a touch of familiarity, but no sense of ownership. And after a short period of time of trying to navigate through these feelings, I would start to drift off into meeting the owner of these feelings. And it was a younger version of me from that specific period of my life where my father was in prison. I could see the pain in his eyes. It was both magical and frightening. I didn't know if I should apologize, if I should try giving him a hug, or whether to just stay silent and let the moment exist. Most of the pain, as far as I could tell, came from the fact that no one had acknowledged or really attended to the feelings and emotions of this young boy. At the time of this happening, I had people who supported me emotionally, of course, through showing strength and all of these things, but never what my, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old version really needed. This was an incredible discovery for me, not necessarily the emotions themselves, but that such a great answer was just provided to me by staying present and not letting the fear of all the emotions and the severity and the intensity of it all scare me away. So I continued to stay with these feelings as time went on, and the more time I spent there, the more access and insight I gained. The element of fear was slowly drifting away, replaced with empathy and even more curiosity. I realized that no one really knew what it was like to be a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid with no clue of where his father was. No one knew what it was like to struggle daily with keeping up hope of him returning. No one knew the frustration of not knowing what was happening. And no one knew the frustration of seeing those other kids have their father pick them up and not knowing when mine was going to pick me up. No one knew it. And it felt like that for the first time in that kid's life, he was shown understanding and emotional support for exactly those feelings. I could tell him, you know what, kid? I know what you feel. I know it sucked. I know you were confused. I know you were hurt. I know you acted out. I know you were chaotic. But trust me, I am here for you. I am here to support you, and we will figure this out together. And almost immediately, I could feel the frustration that had been built up over time leave his body, replaced by calmness and even a slight smile. His eyes were wide open, staring into my soul with a look that I could only describe with one word: gratitude. And it's important to note that a deciding factor that allowed me to so freely venture into these parts of my life is accountability. I removed the blame from all of the people involved as well as I could. Being my father, the people who told me all these variants of the story, whoever I had carried a little bit of blame for during that period, I let go of it. Because I knew that for the experience to have an impact on me, it had to be me looking into me. I saw accountability as the perfect door for that to happen. Everything else that happened, including the choices of other people, were just a natural outcome of such an adverse and difficult situation. Therefore, it had no significance for my own growth. The only thing that had significance for my own personal growth was how much was I willing to discover, how much was I willing to heal, and how much was I willing to accept of what had happened and use that as a foundational base to go forward and become stronger. And since I'm already on the topic of becoming stronger, I want to once again touch back to the previously mentioned effect this whole thing had on my self-value. I mean, I think I already mentioned the conclusions I came to as a kid that, my father's not here because I'm not worth enough and all of these things. And I remember for the first time that I went back and realized that this is what I had concluded with, I almost remember laughing in, I think, relief, but also like disbelief, because I was sitting in my bedroom. I remember this so clearly. It was around 9 p.m. It was a Wednesday because I had written this all down in my diary, so I remember it very clearly. And I remember asking myself, what else could I have logically concluded? As a 7, 8-year-old kid trying to make sense, of course I am going to blame myself. It's what kids do. When something, is going on with their parents or there is a chaotic household, kids usually resort to blaming themselves because they don't have that abstract understanding of adults and what goes into their decision-making progress. They haven't come so far in life yet to understand that it doesn't really have anything to do with them. And, yeah. But it didn't really stop there, however, because once I realized that I had made these conclusions, I also had to, of course, analyze what these conclusions had done to my life. Like, in what way had they been affecting my behavior and my understanding of my place in this world? And these beliefs, if I were to be very honest, have been haunting me for a big chunk of my life, especially when it comes to the decisions I've made that affect both my physical and mental well-being. Like, I would very often not go for the obvious choice that did the most good for me, or that put me in a place where my quality of life would not decrease. I would often go out of my way to sacrifice my own time and my own goals to make sure other people in my life fulfilled theirs. I would, sacrifice a lot of my sleep. I would, the list goes on and on and on, but I have so many memories of myself, putting myself in a bad situation or doing stupid things because I had this belief that I was not worth as much as other people. It's crazy how something so little can grow into such a drastic life belief. Like, it's crazy to think back that period created for me the understanding that my value was not equal to the value of other humans. Thus, I did not deserve a life that was equally valuable to other people or even more. I always thought I deserved less. And yeah, it's when looking back, it's also as if this period of my life sort of stole my self-value away from me. Like, let's say I started at a baseline, but now this prison period happening, it took the self-value away from me. I was now left with very little. It broke it into pieces and just left them there. And now it was up to me to march back into the darkness, find these emotions, find these conclusions, and reclaim what was once rightfully mine, but now had been shattered to pieces: my self-value. And I'll be totally honest with you, that is exactly what I did. I picked up the pieces and I built exactly what I wanted to build. Because due to the high desire of becoming a better version of myself, the only thing I had in mind was to be stronger and more durable. And this time, the valuation I would give myself would be more accurate. If I was to rebuild my self-value, it would be based on real observations and on critical feedback about how things actually were. How was I behaving? How was I performing? How was I thinking? How harmonious was I spiritually towards myself? All of these things that you can measure on the inside, but also on the outside, allowed me to build this strong foundation that would be so difficult to break down by the outside world that trying would be a waste of time. Like, the amount of resilience and strength I have towards whatever is happening on the outside is absolutely admirable, at least by me. The whole rebuilding of my self-value phase has made me into a person that can easily say no. A person that realizes what is good for me and what isn't. And of course, I am still in the starting phase as I am in an unfinished project. But it feels so good to have my self-value built on actual work that I have done. And also, after a while of doing this work, I had started to develop a certain confidence streak where I could continuously prove to myself that I was better at things, and all in all, a greater human than I had previously believed that I was. But this was special. Like, as I already said, it was strictly based on my own personal evidence and what was usually measurable progress in some area, like working out or finance or sleep, nutrition, how many people I made smile that day, how much work I got done, how many hours I had put in towards productivity and self-improvement, and the decreasing hours of time waste, and also the amount of love I started to grow for both myself and people. All of these things were just so visible, and you could not argue them away, that my confidence and self-value and my self-love just increased and increased. It was absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I think the last thing that I would like to touch on from this whole period would be a fear or an insecurity that I had developed. Now, this is connected to the self value thing to a certain degree, but I'll try to present it still as a kind of independent issue or an independent aspect of this whole period. And if I were to place a timestamp on when this was most present for my life, I would say it was a period of around 5-6 years from the age of from around 15, maybe even 14 to 20. From what I can remember, 14 to 20 is when this was most present in my life and controlling everything to a very high degree. And what it was, the fear and insecurity, what it was is that I was afraid that the people I cared the most about, and this would be my dear friends or my family members, not so much other people, but the people that were already integrated into my life and that I had a lot of love for, I was afraid that they would take absence or completely leave my life if I were to again display any signs of low value. So if I did something or said something that I myself perceived to lower the overall value of me in my life, an immediate fear kicked in that the loved ones in my life would now have a good reason to leave, the same way that I thought my father had left because I was not worth enough. Do you see the correlation there? At least I do. And this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking, observing, testing out different theories, and I'm so happy that I am not completely past this, but that I understand it to such a high degree, and like the ins and outs of everything and when it appears in my life and when it goes, that I can work around it, and I'm so much more free than I was before. And the way that it would work was whenever I would produce bad output towards the people I cared deeply about, let's say I disappointed them or I didn't show up to, hang out like we were supposed to, or maybe I got a bad grade at school, maybe I wasn't doing as good as I thought I was supposed to at work, whatever it was, the intense, deep, and fear would immediately kick in. Like, okay, I can't tell this person that this went like this because they might leave me. And so I often resorted also to lying about that things were better than they were. I also overcompensated by saying that the future would be better than it actually was going to be. I was literally feeding the fear directly. I was afraid that if the future wasn't as good as I am currently lying it to be, that the person would now again find a good reason to leave me. And it sounds ridiculous, but this is just the way I was. So I want to share that. And yeah, it was it was crazy because this insecurity was not built on real life facts or feedback. It's not like any of these people actually told me like, "Hey Daniel, we're going to be leaving if you don't do this, or if your future isn't like this, I'm not going to talk to you anymore." That never really happened. It was my own self-evaluation of my actions, behavior, and achievements. And if I deemed them to be unattractive or not impressive enough, the thoughts and feelings of them potentially leaving would again slowly start to build up. And when I first started discovering and noticing this, I couldn't for the life of me figure out what was going on. Why was I so afraid? Have you ever thought about that before? Why are you so afraid of something? Even though you could maybe argue and explain away that it is irrational, you can still never remove the fear itself. And yeah, but eventually, of course, I did. And the way I did that was, since the fear, at least for me in my personal situation, was to a high degree connected to the self-value issue I was talking about earlier, me doing that work with my self-value also slowly started to remove the fear of people leaving. But I also did a lot of work and put in a lot of effort of, getting comfortable with the worst case scenario. I was like, okay, if I am so afraid of this, let's see what actually happens if this happens. So I got comfortable with the fact that all of the people in my life currently that I deem very dear and that I have a lot of love for, what will happen if they actually leave? And I also, in some way, mentally started to prepare myself for the fact that they were going to leave. I was like, okay, if I am a loser, if I don't do what I'm supposed to, this and this person is going to leave. What is that going to be like? I'm going to be heartbroken. I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be this. But okay, if I am so sure that it's going to happen, who cares? Just let it happen. And if it doesn't, then there's nothing to think about. There's nothing to feel. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to contemplate. It will just happen. So I got very comfortable with worst case scenario, but after increasing my self-value and after realizing that why would these people ever leave? I'm a loving, caring, providing, helpful person. I do my best to become better. I'm very open and try and work out my insecurities and not let them destroy my relationship. If I am that person, why would anyone ever even leave? If I had a friend like me, and to a certain degree I do because I have a relationship with myself as well, and this was actually a huge part of this progress, was that when I started to improve the relationship I had with myself, I started realizing that, wow, the people I have in my life also have a relationship with this person that I have a relationship with. And this relationship is pretty awesome, to be honest. So why would they ever leave? They don't have a reason to leave. So those two things of becoming comfortable with the worst case scenario and through rebuilding my own self-value and realizing what an amazing person I actually was, the fear just kind of faded away. It had no function anymore. The only function that fear had was feeding on that little boy or the younger version of me who did not have a self-value built up and who was not comfortable with the worst case scenario. That fear was only functional if that person existed. But after all my work and effort, that person was in the past. And so is my fear. And I think for now, this is all I'm going to talk about this period. I hope some of this has helped someone or inspired you to think of something. And I want to make it perfectly clear that every single thing that has happened to you, and this is just a certain way that I view my life, is that every single thing that has happened to you is directly responsible for you being you. And maybe I already said this during the episode. I am a bit unsure, but if I did, it doesn't matter because it's an excellent point. Every single thing that has happened to you, even this example here of my father going to prison, I am now, to a certain degree, as ridiculous as it sounds, happy for that it happened. And not necessarily happy, but I am appreciative of the period of my life because I have now turned it into something so positive. So I think the key is to go back and realize that this is negatively affecting me, this period or this person or what was said to me or what happened to me or whatever it may be. You have to find out the elements and the aspects in you that were created by that period, change those elements of you, and then you also directly change the perspective you have on that period. Since I have built up my self-value, since I have become more emotionally stable, emotionally strong, and since I have removed a big fear that was controlling my life, this whole period has been very productive and very helpful for my own personal growth. So I now have an appreciative and more positive relationship and perspective on this period of my life. And that is pretty much the formula for all of this. I'll be covering a lot more examples, and you'll be seeing this again and again and again. Something that happens to you, You try and identify the things that happened that directly had an impact on you, and then what did that impact create or shape inside of you? What sort of beliefs, fears, insecurities were created? And then you have to identify what sort of strategy, what sort of activities, what sort of people do you need to have in your life so that you can reinvent or reverse engineer all of these things and now create something within yourself that supports you in a more healthy and beneficial and positive way. Once again, thank you for listening. It's been a blast. I have been waiting so long to do this, and I feel like a kid again. I'm not going to lie. Going through this whole period of my life has reminded me of what it is like to be a child and, playing around with things and, just doing things without thinking too consequentially. And that is what I'm doing. This podcast might be a total failure. It might be a catastrophic embarrassment, but I believe that I have done something that is both good for the world, but extremely good for me. So I feel pure in my heart. I have harmony running through my veins. And yeah, I hope you do something that makes you proud of yourself and something that makes other people smile. Once again, have a lovely, lovely, lovely day and a fantastic life. Peace and love.